The discrepancy amplifier is now operational. Scanning. Scanning. Scanning.
Well, this is it. It's the final expansion for the Outer Worlds, and this time around it follows a classic murder mystery formula with a few nods to classic crime thrillers. I feel a mix of sadness and relief to finally be done with the Outer Worlds, having spent 12 and a half real-world days in the Nintendo Switch version. I know, it's send help. Is this one the killers, or more like the big sleep? Well, let's find out. The narrative takes place in the skies above Eridanos and starts out at a luxury hotel where a famous actress has been murdered. It encapsulates the style and atmosphere of a 1940s detective thriller, placing you in that central role. While you are directed as to where to go next, you can also completely go off the beaten path, and there are clues dotted all over the place for you to discover. Although at its core the story surrounds that murder, there's far more going on here.
Helen was special. Had a certain quality about her.
And we finally get a bit more information about some of the larger companies and bigger players in the world and their own motivations. It's aspects that fans of the series will really appreciate, but they may just go over the heads of those who aren't too bothered with them.
Whoa, it's not what it looks like.
What's really nice is how well written the companions are into the story. There's one particular moment where a certain key character has a much larger impact on the scene. I enjoyed the free-flowing nature of the story, as well as the ability to play through a couple of times to get a different outcome. The hand-holding in the first couple of hours was a touch too overt, but there are some really nice distractions thrown in there, including 3 psychopaths trying to reach the centre of a maze, and a shopkeeper with, that coming out of her neck.
I'm so glad you asked!
As far as gameplay and controls go, it's standard The Outer Worlds. You move around with the left stick, you can use the camera with the right, there's motion aiming in here, and you shoot using the triggers, with the VATS-like ability to slow down time using the bumper button. This allows you to pick out headshots, and it's universally accepted to be pretty damn cool. Personally, I like to play these games using stealth. You can crouch, pick locks, and avoid the line of sight of enemies to perform most actions using silent takedowns. I think this being the last expansion, they could have done a little bit more. It's quite safe, but we do have one new gameplay mechanic, and that's a weapon that allows you to scan for clues. When it beeps, you'll have to aim down the sights of it and then search for the clue or purple aura to help you discover it. And that's where the free roaming elements of the Outer Worlds expansion are at its best. So many of the clues are hidden away. And what starts out feeling very handheld turns into you reading small notes hidden on computer screens or discovering secret tunnels that lead to unique areas. And very often, not only are you rewarded with XP, as is standard, but your small scanner will bleep and you can begin to scan the area to find extra information. This information then feeds back into conversations as you build your case.
What? No! Just because I found the corpse doesn't mean I made her a corpse.
Although the playable area is a touch smaller than some other expansions in the Outer Worlds, it is a reasonably interesting place to explore. It's also filled with a few different factions, and some of those side missions are incredibly off the wall. There's a quote from one of the developers, Nitai Podar, where he talks about how Eridanos and the second DLC were never intended to put a bow on the main storyline. So what you can't expect from this is for it to feel like it ties up all those loose ends. In fact, on the contrary, it creates a few of its own, but clearly they're gearing up towards the Outer Worlds 2. The investigation mechanics are straightforward enough, but they do work well. Everything's tracked within your quest log, and at least they tried something new with that scanning mechanic, although it's not the most in-depth of changes. One area I'm always looking for as a verified loot hoover is any new gear added. Thankfully, there are some nice cosmetics for you to pick up. Most notably, I finally have a replacement for my moon helmet, and if you're sneaky enough, you may stumble across an armory that has some entirely new weapons. Saying the expansion is for fans kind of is a moot point, because you probably wouldn't be buying an expansion if you weren't one. And with that in mind, I don't think you'll be disappointed. It's on a par with the last DLC. It's nice to see them take a slightly different approach, and I was pleased to see multiple endings to allow for several playthroughs. But I do really feel like they took the easy option as far as the content goes, and as a result, the gameplay is starting to feel a tiny bit dated. It scores 15 out of 20, and the controls remain identical. It's nice they have gyroscopic aiming, but some of the performance issues are a touch worse here than the last expansion, and that affects the controls. Controls score 16 out of 20. As you'll know, the Outer Worlds on Switch launched like some form of dire monstrosity. The performance was horrendous, the visuals terrible, and it was a bit of a disaster. Since then, it's seen a number of patches to improve things. However, I don't feel like this DLC particularly benefits from most of those. In fact, it feels like a bit of a step back in some regards. It could be a result of the open areas, or perhaps the color palettes used, but it is not looking particularly pretty on Switch. It's passable, it just really feels like the Switch is struggling to keep up. There are stutters here and there, the occasional load-in streaming, but yeah, they're going to have to do some serious magic with the sequel to make it work well on Switch. With all of that said, from an artistic standpoint, the game looks good. I do like these floating islands, and the Grand Colonial Hotel parallels society. The higher you get, the more luxurious the surroundings, but venture down into the basements where the staff live and you'll find a real juxtaposition from a visual standpoint. My preferred way to play is actually in handheld mode. That smaller screen makes things look sharper, but it's never going to be an oil painting. Visuals score 13 out of 20. Audio, however, is as strong as ever, and the film noir style soundtrack here, as well as some of the cutscenes, are an improvement over the other ones we've seen in previous iterations. There are a couple of new voice actors, and those hold up nicely. There are also several lines of dialogue for your team, so I'd say this expansion offers a bit of a step up when it comes to audio, and that scores 17 out of 20. Once again, the DLC is costing £11.99, or your regional equivalent. You may have also gone for the Season Pass, which gives you access to all the DLCs at a slightly reduced rate overall. The difference here is the other one was around about 15 to 20 hours long, but this one slightly shorter at 8 to 10 hours. However, it does have multiple endings, so there is a real incentive to play through a couple of times. There's also a lot of side content and hidden items, so they're almost the same in terms of content. I give value 15 out of 20. If you're a fan of murder mystery and like the idea of once again venturing into the Fallout-like Outer Worlds, then you'll really enjoy this expansion. And it's well and truly into fan service territory with some of the characters you'll meet. It's more of the same, for better or worse. It scores a SwitchUp score of 76%. Let me know in the comments if you'll be picking this one up, if you're a fan of the Outer Worlds, and if like me you are desperate that they bring some of the Fallout games across. A big thanks to the developers for the review copy, although we didn't actually use that, I'd already bought it. For all things Switch, all the time. Oh, thanks to our patrons, you guys are amazing. We've had a couple of new ones, which is awesome. Keep it Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!